Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Friday Twilight Show. I'm Claire Cannon. Thank you for joining me, whether you are here live or listening to the podcast. As teachers, we spend our days supporting our students to learn, but what can we learn from and share with each other, especially those in very different education systems, and what do we have in common? If you are here on Friday evening, thank you very much. After a busy week, I do appreciate you joining us and listening in. And if you are listening on catch up on the podcast, thank you for taking the time to do that as well. So I'm spending the show today talking to two guests who I can just see have joined, which is brilliant. I'm always a little bit nervous about technology doing what it's supposed to do. I'm really looking forward to talking to two guests. I've got Martin Richards and Kiki Peterson to talk about experiences gained from teaching internationally and working abroad. So we'll look at practices that we have in common and also the things that we can learn from where we've got differences, things that we can share with one another that perhaps we can take, reflect on and adapt for use in our own settings. So firstly, a few things from me that stood out when I was doing some reading actually in preparation for this show, because I've only taught in England and most of my career in quite a small geographical area as well. So I started having a look at what is happening in other countries. Now, both guests this evening are experienced in the Swedish education system, and we quite often hear in the UK about the Nordic countries in general having very good school systems. So I wanted to find out a bit more about that and see, is that the case? Are there other things going on? Where do things stand really? So things that I found as similarities. So firstly, education being compulsory, and that both the UK and Sweden have mandatory schooling for children. In the UK, typically we start around age 5 and continue until 16. Some students staying until 18. In Sweden, schooling begins a little bit later. Age 6 was commonly sort of suggested as being the starting point, compulsory until 16. And both systems really emphasise early education as being fundamental to lifelong learning. I don't think there's many people that would disagree with that, although if you are listening in and you would like to text in your thoughts on that or anything else, please do so. I'd love to hear from you. Second thing that we have in common is that education is publicly funded. Both the UK and Sweden have strong publicly funded education systems, particularly to ensure that primary and secondary schooling is available to all. And whilst it is true that private schools exist in both systems, the majority of students in both countries are attending state-funded schools. Another interesting point for me, given that there is a lot of positivity around the Swedish system, and maybe one or both of my guests this evening might challenge me on this, which is great if they do. We hear a lot about there being much more of a play-based emphasis, play-based elements to learning, particularly in not just what we would call EYFS, so when they're sort of 4 or 5 years old, but actually a little bit later, whereas in the UK they're by year 1 and year 2 very much into sort of more formal learning. But actually, both systems do have quite a structured national curriculum to guide the content, to guide the standards, and to make sure that there are core things which are covered, particularly in literacy, numeracy, and the sciences. So that was quite interesting for me because we do hear lots, as I say, about there being much more of a focus on play and natural development, whereas in the UK sometimes do hear comments quite a lot about children being asked to do things before they are developmentally ready, perhaps, for some of the skills, some of the knowledge, and some of the time spans that they're expected to concentrate as well. Also, going back to comparisons between the two systems, both do have optional but encouraged education beyond the compulsory age ranges. In the UK, that's A levels, it can be vocational. Obviously, we talk about things like university as an option for some as well. I did like the fact that in Sweden there seems to be much more of um, an equality between academic and vocational tracks. And whilst we do strive for that, I think here in the UK, there's still a perception out there that academic is somehow better or more worthwhile, whereas actually, we know that that isn't necessarily the case. So to me, it does sound like both systems have things that are broadly similar, quite a few areas of commonality. However, I'm sure there will be some significant differences too. As I say, we do hear a lot about Nordic countries in general being celebrated for their quality of education. But I'm sure that whilst that may well be the case, there will be some significant challenges that they face as well. So after the break, I will share a few points around this again from my sort of background research, and then I'm going to invite Martin and Kiki to share their thoughts. I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Do you ever wish you could sit down with other teachers and delve into the challenges and opportunities we face? Well, that's exactly what Table Talks at Bet UK is all about. Join small roundtable discussions based on your selected topics to share insights, learn from peers, and tackle the big issues in education, all in a sponsor-free environment. This is your chance to connect and collaborate like never before. Be part of the conversation at Bet UK in January 2025. Visit uk.betshow.com to learn more.
Okay, thank you as always to our sponsors for their support of us here at Teachers Talk Radio. In this show, I'm looking at what we can share with and learn from colleagues who work in very different locations and indeed very different education systems, potentially very different. We're actually going to explore some of those whether they're conceptions, misconceptions, I don't know. We will find out. We'll soon be hearing from Martin and Kiki, who both have experience in the Swedish education system. I'm really excited to hear what they say. And, we do hear a lot about the success of Nordic countries in general. But actually, in preparation for this show, when I was reading around, how the system works, different countries as well, actually, not just the UK and Sweden, but all of the sort of different countries that are relatively close to us, but perhaps have their own ways of doing things. You will inevitably come across things that are also challenges. And we know here in the UK, we have lots of issues, particularly around SEND funding. There's always the big debate around the retention and recruitment of teachers, particularly perhaps those more experienced who are leaving the profession, and also the questions around why people are leaving within the first 3 to 5 years and going on to pursue completely different careers. Anyway, that's enough about the challenges here. But what did I find out about challenges abroad? So I did come across an article in Improving Teaching by Harry Fletcher Wood. Harry described there being an increase in the behaviour difficulties, the number and complexity. And actually, he compared the worst behaviour in the UK as being normal in Sweden, which, if that was to be the case, that's quite shocking. Again, I'll be interested to see what Martin and Kiki have to say on things like that. Harry also talked about issues with mobile phones in class, layers of bureaucracy to do with how the education system is monitored and who is responsible for what. And that's not just within individual schools, but that was, broader when you start looking at local and national government levels. Particularly with concerns being passed on to other staff or departments not taking responsibility for something, passing it on to somebody else, and actually you end up with people stuck in the middle and no resolution. And the other comment that came up in his report was that teachers sometimes feel unsupported by their school leaders. Now, some of you listening may well resonate with some of those points. So the question is, what can we do about it? Is this a true picture? Are those challenges really what's going on? And going back to my original questions, they're kind of true. What can we share with each other and what can we learn from each other that we can take, reflect on, improve on, adapt, embed, all of those things in our respective settings? Now, as always, if you are listening live and you have any thoughts, any comments, any questions for my guests, please do message in. It's always lovely to hear from you. It's enough for me for now. I'm going to invite Martin to say hello, so I can see him there.
Hello,
hi, Martin.
Good evening.
Hello, how are you?
Nervous, oddly enough.
Oh, well,
I think that's good though.
Good nerves is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. And what time is it for you? Because for me, it's 6:15.
We're an hour ahead of you.
Okay. So it's a little bit later in your evening, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely earns the title Twilight Hours. I've got my pajamas on already. Thank you for on radio.
Painting us a picture on this Friday evening.
I'm afraid so, yes. Sorry.
You're
I've got my Horlicks and ready for bed as soon as the
brilliant
show ends.
Do you know what? I think I might just do the same. It's just, I was going to say it's just got very cold. It's gone down to about 8 degrees. I'm not sure whether you would agree that that's cold.
Oh, well, it will go down to significantly below that during the next few months, but 8 feels a bit chilly at the moment.
Okay. So broadly the similar in that sense then?
Yeah, the UK temperatures are cold and damp, but there's an advantage to going below maybe 8-10 degrees below zero. All the water freezes and you get that glorious crisp fresh, and which you don't get. I mean, I'm from the southern part of the UK. It just doesn't happen. I'm in the west coast of Sweden, and sometimes it happens in maybe January, February. You get this glorious crisp. Well, you can ask Kiki. She's from the same place as well, so she probably got some geography to share.
I'm hoping she's going to be able to join us in a minute because I can see her in our list of listeners, but I can't actually see her as a speaker. Oh, I think she might just be sorting out the technology. Hi, Kiki. I'm just putting a hello to you in the chat. But what we'll do, Martin, we'll have a bit of a chat if that's all right, and then we'll join Kiki in when she's ready in a few minutes' time.
Absolutely.
So could I start you've said a quick hello, but could you just give us a little bit of an introduction to your education background?
My goodness. I took a deep breath there because I am very, very old and there's a hell of a lot of it. So born in the UK, 1956. Born in Kent. And I did my university degree in Sussex. What a surprise. And I did my teacher training there too. Yep. I'm a maths teacher. And I'm good at maths because of my maths teachers. So I'm carrying the flag for the kind attention I got from the maths teacher. It still is still with me. And a lot of my passion for teaching was born then, all those years ago. I worked in schools in the UK as a maths teacher, and my experience of schools at that time was not very nice. Unfortunately, I was in a school where they still use corporal punishment.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was asked to bear witness, as part of my indoctrination, to bear witness to a ritual beating of a teenager that the teacher, the head of school, and the headmaster couldn't control. And they thought that holding him down over a table and beating him with a stick was the best way to go.
Well, I'm glad we have moved on from
I
that.
thought they would have moved on from that. And I was repeatedly saying, this is wrong, immoral, illegal. And I was told to shut up or I'd lose my job. I didn't shut up.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I'm still honking that horn. Because there are things that are right and wrong. And even though the majority earlier than that thought that hitting children was okay, there was a change in the law, but not much of a change in the behavior. And I'd somehow managed to talk with, I mean, I was not much of more than a teenager myself. I was 20 something. And I was able to talk to these teenagers, and I knew what the problem was. They felt bullied by the teachers, so they gave as good as they got.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I left the teaching profession in the UK and thought, what shall I do? Oh, you ask why teachers leave. Yeah. Well, it's not because of beating. You know, that doesn't actually happen, I suppose, I hope. But it's because they don't fit in. They can't do what they wanted to do. I think a lot of teachers are dreamers. They believe they can change the world. They believe they can bring about wonderful change by being a teacher. And once you get into the teaching system, it's a little bit harder than they thought.
That's probably a really good way of summing it up, actually, because you interview or you talk to, as they're known now, ECTs, early career teachers, and quite often, as you say, they come in and they have these fantastic ideas. They want to do things differently. They want to bring about change, and they find themselves kind of stuck in a sort of quite a rigid system sometimes, or being told, you can do it, but only up to this point, or you can only go so far, and then rein it back in. And that's hard. That's hard when you want to try something new. And I think when you are new, that's as good a time as any, isn't it, to try new things, because you'll learn from it and you'll then improve. But that's a really good point you make about people not actually fitting in, so they go and do something different.
Yes, I mean, if you've trained as a teacher, you've got some serious skills, and I completely, showed up during COVID. If you ever wanted to see how adaptable is a teacher, bingo. I mean, you just got a global demonstration of it. Look at us go!
Yeah.
We pivoted, and we pivot on Wednesday, and we pivot again on Friday.
Yes.
We did what we had to do to get the job done, and did we get a pat on the back? Not much. So, okay. So I'm back to Sweden.
Go on then.
There's a bit more background. So I came to Sweden looking for a job. I didn't think I'd be a teacher, but they wanted teachers here. Didn't speak Swedish. So I looked into where can I teach? And it was the same pattern here with the English-speaking schools of bullying head teachers. And I thought, well, this is not the place for me. I did something else. I used my native speaking skills to teach people English. And at the age of 50, I went back into teaching. That flame that was lit in the maths room all those years ago never died. I'm hoping there are many young teachers who think, oh, what, it never dies? Nope, it doesn't have to. I went back into the teaching profession as something other than a classroom teacher. Initially, I gave talks to teenagers, because teenagers need a jolly good talking to. My talks were called Making Choices to be Proud of.
Wow.
Tackle everything from alcohol, drug abuse, well, you name it, any choices that
Yeah.
teenagers are about to make, let's make ones you can be proud of.
Mm.
And we dug into values, personalities, and the variety of metrics, let's say, that would help a teenager equip themselves to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I would often tell stories of my life. I'd run a company, and I had plenty of stories from there. And here's the situation I would describe for the students. And I'd say, well, what do you think? What should I do? And they would tell me. They would tell me what they thought I should do. And I would tell them what I did. And then they would tell me what they thought of it. There were a few decisions I made in my life that I was not proud of. And they would tell me, hey, that's a pretty ropey decision. I said, yeah. And I'm still embarrassed. And you caught me. And I'm standing here and I'm red-faced and you can see it. That's why it's better to make decisions that you're proud of. Because you get caught. Somebody somewhere later in life will go, why did you do that? Mum, Dad, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was basically a living example of you better make better decisions because you're going to get asked by somebody at some point, why did you do that?
Yeah.
And if you don't know why, who else can know?
Yeah. I really like that. And actually being open and honest about, your own choices, your own experiences. I think, that's something not everybody does. And then you run the risk of being seen as just, one of those boring adults almost, don't you? They're just telling us what to do again. But actually, bringing in that personal experience, bringing in something real, it's much more relatable. Yeah.
I never had the intention of telling anybody anything. My lesson preparation was a blank piece of paper with 25 years experience written on it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would go and the teacher would have told the students, here comes Mr. Richards and he's going to give a talk, and they'd named the talk something else. And the subtitle was making choices to be proud of, but they called it something else. And one of them said, he's a psychologist. Oh, okay, I'm not a psychologist, right? So I had to admit in front of the class, it says on the door there that I'm a psychologist, but I'm not. No. Is it okay if I stay? And the teacher was a little bit embarrassed because they hadn't written the note either, and they said, well, I'm sure we're all interested to hear what Mr. Richards has to say, aren't we? Oh, they were all very polite.
Yeah.
And I then asked the students, well, I'm a life coach. What do you want to know? And I said, hands go up. What's a life coach? Okay, definition. What else? What else? What else? We spent about 10 minutes eliciting what it was they wanted to know about someone who, with my appearance, my age, who calls themselves a life coach. What's one of those? So I put all their questions up on the board. I asked for a few minutes to think. This is me doing a lesson plan.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a plan. Would this work? And I group their questions together. First this, then that, and in between we take a break. How does that sound? And they were on board with it. It was their lesson design with me as a kind of talking encyclopedia about what I know and what I remember and anything else that we can look up on Google. For example, they asked me, how much does a life coach earn? I said, I don't know, you can Google that. I know what I earn, but I don't know what a life coach earns. You can Google it. And they would do the research live while I was in the room, and they would feed in the facts. They would fact check me basically whilst I was there.
Yeah. It sounds, what you described is a very flexible way of working. And, we touched on the fact earlier on that possibly one of the reasons behind people leaving teaching is they feel constrained, they feel boxed in. And I wonder, have you found any differences in, the Swedish system compared to the UK system in terms of that level of autonomy, I suppose, for professionals, for teachers?
I think Kiki's going to be the better person to ask there, because I've taught in Swedish schools, but I've always skirted around the Swedish system, if you understand me. I've managed never to be hemmed in by the syllabus or things like that. I started when I was 50, and my role wasn't to teach a lesson from a book or a syllabus, but it was to engage the hearts and minds of teenagers who could be toying with all sorts of dramatic, disastrous, funny choices.
Yeah.
I've given you some simple examples, but there are others that are more dramatic. I see that Kiki's come online, so I'm hoping that she will give a little balance to the conversation here.
So she said she's having trouble because as soon as her phone goes on sleep mode, I think it's pushing her out as a speaker. So she's just logged out and done the whole turn it off, turn it on kind of if that will let her in. Otherwise, Kiki, we'll see if we can get it sorted when we play the news shortly, because we'll get a little bit of a longer time when we can try and troubleshoot. But
otherwise, Kiki, I'm fine talking for an hour.
Oh dear.
Don't worry, I can ad-lib for about 3 or 4 weeks.
Brilliant.
As long as I get a sandwich every now and again.
I don't know if I can do that from here in the UK, but I can send you an emoji. That's about it.
That'll do.
That'll do. Obviously, moving from one country to another, one system. I know you said you sort of skirted around it, but I guess you will still see some of the things that are challenges and some of the things that are perhaps going better in one country than another. So I just wonder, bearing in mind what I've sort of said at the beginning, we hear a lot in the UK about the Nordic countries being amazing, and it's all very lovely over there, and obviously you look at certain measures like the PISA scores, they're generally pretty good compared to the UK. So just wondered what your direct experiences are really.
Well, my direct experience comes from coaching the teachers more than teaching the students. So it's one step removed. So my work, just to give it a little bit of context, this was close to I was about 60. My task was to go to the school, to make contact with a number of teachers, usually 4 or 5 of them, and basically build a trustful relationship with them so that I could come and observe their lessons. I wasn't there like an Ofsted at all. It was almost the opposite.
Okay.
I was there by invitation. My checklist was a blank piece of paper, but there were a number of things that I was recommended to suggest. But you heard earlier that I do work from a blank sheet of paper. So the teachers, I could say, well, what do you want me to look at? And in particular, what do you want me to ignore? Because there are things that happen in the classroom that, I don't want you to be embarrassed. So I'll ignore them. I promise that I will ignore them. And what I noticed very quickly in these schools that had asked for support was the general fuzziness about what are the rules here. So in the corridors, there was a flow, an ebb and flow of young people pretty much all the time.
Okay.
So from my memory, and again, it's decades before, my memory of school was the bell would ring, the corridors would empty, the doors would shut, and the lesson would start.
Yeah.
The bell would ring, the door would open, the corridors would fill up, kids would bash into each other, and they would grab their bags, and they would go into another classroom, and the doors would shut, and another lesson would start. In Sweden, the lessons start pretty much when the kids are in, and there's no bell, and it's much more fluid, fuzzy.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I wasn't there to judge that, but it's an observation that I didn't know when the lesson starts.
Yeah.
I was just there to observe. I would write down the time I thought the lesson started because I was there to observe it, and we would comment afterwards. That seemed to be 10 minutes after the time that was written down on a piece of paper, and we would perhaps discuss or totally ignore that depending on what the teacher wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because it's a non-topic, if the teacher doesn't want to talk about it, there's no point bringing it up. I'm not there to check or do a control. The other thing is the teacher tends to be anywhere and everywhere in the room. There isn't like a teacher's zone at the front of the room, in front of the board by the teacher's desk, as I expected when I was a student.
Yeah.
Even when I was giving my talks and my lectures, I tended to create a stage at the front of the room. This is where I do my talking, and if I want somebody to come up, I'll bring them up here into our shared space. Basically, you're the audience. And I'm the edutainer up here. But with the flow of people in and out of the classroom and the teacher sort of round around the room. In fact, for one teacher, the question was to track where am I in the room, because they actually get lost as to who's getting my attention and who's not. Am I missing anybody? And others would sit at their desk and miss everybody. So there is no right or wrong. Again, absolutely no judgment. It was, my previous expectations, I try to set them aside, leave them in the rucksack as best I can, and work with what I see and what I hear and take notes, and then bring that back to the teacher's attention.
I think that bit you just said, about what you see and what you hear, and the fact that you'd gone in because the school had asked you to, rather than because it was put upon them, that's such, that is, as you said, it's the polar opposite to what happens here with Ofsted. And again, one of the big factors that contributes to people saying they're leaving teaching is feeling constantly scrutinised, constantly under pressure to perform. And actually what you're alluding to is that it was with a supportive mindset, it was non-judgmental, and you are just working with what you find when you get there, not any preconceived expectations. And that, to me, it sounds very radical to someone who's very much UK based through and through, but that sounds like it could make a huge difference to staff. And I wonder sort of, how do staff react and respond to that approach?
Well, I think Kiki's answered your question there in the chat. This is the way teachers build relationships. Like, the relationships with their students they're unique. So it's not, I'm the teacher, you're the student, that's it. One type of relationship. Every time the student turns up, whatever time they turn up, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And we could dig into why, and we could find out why if we wanted to. But the whole point is, this is your safe space. You're welcome. You're not late. You're here now.
Yeah.
And whatever work you're doing, you're not ahead or behind what you're supposed to be doing. You're working on this now.
Yeah.
So it is more fluid. It's more, I keep saying the word fluid. It's current, real, in the moment. There is a syllabus, absolutely. It's why I wanted Kiki to sort of speak to this, because I don't actually teach from the syllabus. I teach from what's happening in the moment. So that was my experience of observing teachers. And I wanted to say that in some cases, when I was in the school, the administration, the head, or even sometimes several people in administration, were not doing a very good job, if I was to judge them.
Yeah.
But I never got a chance to get into strong good, strong conversation with them. It was only, I don't understand what they're doing. They're either not there, or if they are, they're extremely angry. and they're barking orders left, right, and centre. And this is not the way to create order. This is just a way to scare people.
Mm.
And on the other hand, I've walked corridors with head teachers who are enormously proud of their staff and their students, and who radiate leadership. And as I'm saying it, I'm shaking, from every blood cell in their body. I mean, I remember one guy, as we were walking along, he caught two students watching this is going to age me, watching a DVD. They had the locker door open and they were snorting away a DVD. And he just said, "Boys," and they froze and they were about to run away. And he went up to them and he said, "I don't care what you're looking at. I want you to stop." And they did. And he goes, "Oh, sorry. I said, "No, not sorry. Show me how you want to be. Show me how you can be." And then he said, "You've got young people around you. Show them how to be young men. Show them how to do it." And you could see their chests came out, their heads went up, the DVD went away, and they said, "We won't do it again." He said, "No, just don't do it again. Don't promise, just don't."
Yeah.
And I said, "That was excellent leadership." He said, 25 years in the military will do that for you. And I said, "Wow, you went from the military to be a head teacher?" He said, "Yeah, why not?"
Oh, why not indeed? And
why not? So I'm hoping, ex-military, get yourself to a school. We need you.
We do. I mean, the bit, just going back a little bit, when you said you're not late, you are here now. I mean, I can't remember if I shared with you before the programme actually, but my sort of recent teaching background is in alternative provision. And we have students that have been excluded from their secondary school, their mainstream school, for all sorts of reasons, quite often trauma in their background, often unmet needs, ADHD, autism, all sorts of combinations going on. And despite whatever, their background, one of the common things is that they have not been attending lessons, or they've been turning up late, or if they have been there, their behaviour has meant that they've not remained in the lesson. And actually that piece around "you're here" is very much what we work on in the alternative provision. They might not have arrived on time, they might have not come into lesson until 11 o'clock, but they're here now. And that's interesting, because we see the difference in the quality of relationships. Yes, we do have far fewer students in the school as well, so there are other things, but that when you're in a mainstream school in the UK, it is very much almost militaristic, actually. You've got to be there. Lesson starts at 10, maths is at 10, you're there for 10, you leave, and you go to English at 11, and then you go to science at 12. And it's there is no flex, there's no give, there's kind of no almost humanity to it.
Well, that's not a school, is it?
Well, it is. It is how schools operate. Whether it's the right way to operate, I suppose that's a whole nother show.
Yeah. Well, but I haven't been in the UK school for, sufficiently long to have forgotten about it. That's not the way schools work here. So with the exception of the grumpy head teachers, on the ones that I've met, and the excellent head teachers, I would say the ones in the middle are aiming to create a safe space where everyone feels welcome when they are there, to do the best you can on the day with whatever you got. And sometimes you got enough and sometimes you haven't.
Yeah.
It's like, it's inclusive, but at the same time, come on, do we need to climb up those curtains? That kind of thing. What was I thinking of? The running in the corridor. Instead of saying, "Don't run in the corridor," they'll ask, "Do you need to run in the corridor?" It's much softer. There's that kind of fluidity again.
Yes.
I can't think of the word in English, but they have a way of tackling aggression and conflict that's soft. It's, I'm going to say fluid. I have to improve my English a little bit. I can only think of the Swedish word. Damn.
Give us it in Swedish and hopefully somebody will translate.
I'm sure Kiki can. Låg affektiv bemötande. How about that? I've been here so long I can even say it in Swedish. And I was doing this without thinking about it. By the way, when I left the school, my first school in the UK, I wanted to carry on teaching, but I didn't know how. And I naturally, without thinking about it, created a small school that took in students who had been kicked out of school, out of the secondary school.
Yeah.
And the ones who didn't fit in, I picked out all the odd ones. I mean, the tail end of your normal curve.
Yes.
All the super bright and
quirky.
the awkward ones, the quirky kids. And I had five chairs and 3 tables in my living room.
Yeah.
And I ran a school from there. And it was free.
Wow.
Because I couldn't charge anybody, I could not charge them money. And they turned up and I made them tea, we had cakes, and we took photographs, and we did everything. Low arousal, thank you.
Oh, there
Kiki.
we go.
Yes. If someone's triggered, you don't want to go in there and bang them on the head. No, you want to get under the radar. Don't even look at them if you can avoid it. Thank you.
And actually, while we've picked up on Kiki's phrase there, thank you, just going back again, talking about the Swedish system being very inclusive. And I really get that sense, obviously hearing from you, Martin, but also a couple of Kiki's comments that she's put in there about everyone's welcome. It's the school's job to make sure the students are supported, and the crucial bit in the way that they need, because I think sometimes what happens, at least here in the UK, is sort of support is a bit like, you've got dyslexia, so you get this. And actually that, everyone with dyslexia is unique. And just because one person needs something on, I don't know, a blue background, doesn't mean they all do.
Right.
And that is a bit of a sweeping statement. Obviously, there is more nuance than that. But there does sometimes we do end up with this thing where it's a bit of a blanket approach to support rather than being truly individual. And again, Kiki's comment about teachers are sometimes more like mentors.
Yeah.
I love that, because actually what a teenager needs is, like we said at the beginning, it's not being constantly told. Yes, obviously there's a place to tell them this is a fact that's going to get you through, your maths bit, because you need to know it to be able to do Pythagoras, for example. But, you've got to work with people, haven't you? Not just do things to them.
Yeah. Both Kiki and I work with teenagers. I'm not so, what's the word, not so up to date how it is with the younger children, but I think it's even more developed around this individual. Let's find out what this child needs and provide it as best we can. There is a set of tools, blue paper or whatever it might be. There is a set of resources that can be used, but the teachers get to adapt in collaboration with the students. Let's find something that works, because there's no point going through school not being able to learn just because the text was the wrong color.
Yeah.
Who knew that was the problem?
Yeah.
Just as an example, now a colleague that both Kiki and I know has come across changing his language, managed to get a student free of his overthinking. So if he asked a student to tell him about something, the students, I don't know. It would lock. I mean, it's typical that I don't know means I don't know what to say, I don't know how to say it. But he took out the word tell and replaced it with the word describe.
Huh.
And suddenly, describe how you would describe your day. Suddenly, I can describe it, can I? I don't have to tell you, I can describe it. That word freed him into using visual language instead of oral language. I mean, it's stupid because he's still speaking, but it asked them in a different way. And it's our job, this is me standing on my shoebox, our job as teachers to find the right fish, right? We can't say, okay, I've asked you the question, you couldn't get it right, you are bad. Next person. No, I know it's in there somewhere. I've got to fish them out. I know that you know, and that question was a bad question from me. Let's see if I can rephrase it. And now the teacher that we were talking about, he says, I've got a key for every one of them. I use it for all of them. And the ones that have been a bit reluctant before, but they've been okay, I used his technique and they're much, much better. The results are skyrocketing. He said, who knew that you could go from mediocre to really high quality just by asking the same question in a different way?
In a different way. And that's so simple, isn't it, as well? That's not something that requires masses of time, which, people don't have a lot of time. It doesn't require a lot of money. It doesn't require a lot of investment. It's just a little bit of self-reflection and a little bit of perhaps sharing. And I noticed actually Kiki's just put in the comments that at the start of a term, the teachers start with the mapping conversation. So, but interestingly, Kiki, just picking up on your wording, you said to hear what the students need, not to ask, not to suggest, but to hear them. And that's so powerful for them to feel that they have that level of ownership and there's that kind of shared responsibility and understanding of them as an individual, which I think that is something we're perhaps not quite getting right necessarily in some schools anyway, in the UK. I just want to say, wow, I'd love that here because it really would make a difference. And I can see, it would be time consuming, but
well, it is and it isn't. When I'm going back a few years, Kiki, so I predate Kiki by a couple of decades. It's quite funny when we talk. I go, oh yeah, I did that 20 years ago. What we had to begin with when we're talking with teachers, and I'm talking about coaching of training teachers to coach a bit more. Teacher, we don't have time for that. I said, well, hang on a minute. Didn't you just tell me that the students aren't learning? And you're trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, and it's not going in. Isn't that a waste of time now at the end of term? I can guarantee you, if you spend that time, half of that time, a quarter of that time at the beginning, you would, oh no, it's too late now. So even for next group of students? And those teachers who said, all right, I'll give it a go, have learned how to ask, listen, adapt their teaching to the students' needs, have said all the problems go away. Not because now the teaching is adapted, but because the student steps up, takes the responsibility of learning, instead of saying, you're my teacher, teach me.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful transformation. I'm thinking of a guy, he's called Martin, very similar name to mine. And he said he was struggling getting through the end of term because his energy was getting low. Because this is like the last, get them out the door. It's the same thing every year. And it's always, you can always tell the beginning who it's going to be. And I said, what if it wasn't? What if you took at the beginning of term, those students, you already know who it's going to be, sit with them, do this. I didn't call it mapping, but have that conversation. What do I need? What do you need me to know about you? Yeah. What drives you? And how would you like me to be when you get stuck? How would you like me to be when you da-da-da-da? And you have this conversation. It's not so the teacher has information. It's so the student takes ownership of their learning process, begins to understand what it is, but also begins to verbalize what it is and owns it. And then every now and again, the teacher will say, Martin will say, oh yeah, little reminder, it was this, wasn't it? Oh yeah, right. These are your goals. No, these are my goals for you. No, these are your goals for you. And they really shape up. A couple of them slip through the net because he's not a training coach. He's only had 10 hours, but okay. He said, made all the difference in the world. It's like butter now.
And I think for me, I think back to teachers that I've, worked in quite a few schools over my career. And, there's always some teachers that people go, oh, they never have any behaviour problems. Everyone behaves there, or so-and-so always behaves to them. They always, but they never behave for me. And actually, when you look at what's going on, it's very rarely about teaching style. It might be that the student has a particular interest in a subject, which may help, but it's nearly always around the fact that that teacher has done something, whatever it may be, but done something to build more than just the teacher-pupil relationship. They've, whether it's asked about their interests, asked about their pet, asked them how they learn, spent some time with them when they were stuck and actually made them feel valued. But there's always something relational which is going on. And what I'd like to do is pick up on that a little bit more after we've taken a break for the news, because it's something that we know can be really powerful, but it also has, in the UK, there's quite a sort of binary position. There's people like me who are going, absolutely, relational approaches are great. And then there are people on the other side going, too free, too much room for error. What if it all goes wrong? So,
lovely.
Yes, I'd like to pick up on that. I'm sure you've got lots to say. So we'll take a quick break now, and then we will come back and explore that some more. Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Kiki, as well. We'll try and get you joined in, Kiki, as well during the news.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Do you ever wish you could sit down with other teachers and delve into the challenges and opportunities we face? Well, that's exactly what Table Talks at BetUK is all about. Join small roundtable discussions based on your selected topics to share insights, learn from peers, and tackle the big issues in education, all in a sponsor-free environment. This is your chance to connect and collaborate like never before. Be part of the conversation at BetUK in January 2025. Visit uk.betshow.com to learn more.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
A group representing 1,400 private schools will press ahead with plans for a legal challenge against the government's introduction of VAT from January, according to the BBC. The Independent Schools Council, the body which includes most independent schools in the UK, has voted to pave the way for legal action which will be brought on behalf of parents, including those with children with special educational needs. A Treasury spokesperson told the BBC they do not comment on potential litigation. Chancellor Rachel Reeves confirmed private schools would no longer be exempt from VAT in the autumn budget, but said the money raised would help to provide the highest quality of support and teaching in the state sector. The government has estimated it would raise £460 million extra to spend on state schools next year, rising to £1.7 billion by 2029-30. The ISC is hoping for a judicial review of the government's policy, which will focus around claims of breaches of the European Convention on Human Rights, specifically Article 14, the prohibition of discrimination, and Article 2, the right to education. The ISC says its legal claimants will be parents who argue they cannot find an alternative education for their children in the state sector, and are likely to include families with children with special educational needs. In an impact assessment, the government confirmed that only those children with a local authority, EHCP, with a private school named on it will be exempt from the VAT policy. The Guardian reports on plans by some UK schools to boost maternity pay to stem the numbers of female teachers in their 30s leaving the profession. Head teachers and charities, according to the article, are warning that more than 9,000 women aged between 30 and 39 left state education last year, and that government will not fix teacher shortages unless it acts to stop experienced women leaving. Experts say alongside a standard maternity pay package for teachers that lags behind many other employers, excessive workload and guilt about not having time for their own children are leading women in this age group to conclude that motherhood is not compatible with teaching. Now, an Academy Trust which runs schools in Hull and the East Riding of Yorkshire is planning to help with the CEO saying nobody should have to choose between being seen as a good teacher or a good mum and dad. The Trust now approves 98% of all requests for flexible working and has a policy that everyone must be able to attend their own children's sports days and school plays. The Trust is also diverging from most of the sector, where teachers get 4 weeks maternity leave at full pay, 2 weeks at 90%, then 12 weeks on half pay. Instead, they'll offer from day one 18 weeks on full pay and 8 on half pay for teachers and support staff. They will also offer uncapped paid leave for women who suffer a miscarriage. Other academy trusts have also enhanced maternity packages. The Department for Education said recruiting and keeping great teachers in our classrooms is vital to improving life chances for all children. We are committed to resetting the relationship with the education workforce and working alongside them to re-establish teaching as an attractive, expert profession. The BBC in Scotland reports that a council looks set to drop plans to switch to a 4.5-day school week following consultation. The local authority in Dumfries and Galloway was considering the move to develop and enhance education provision in the region. However, the majority of parents who took part in their survey were against the plans. A council report has recommended maintaining the current school week structure in the face of the feedback. The move was being considered as part of plans to modernise teaching provision, but the early Friday finish was described as yet another headache for families by the union Unison. The findings of the consultation will be taken to an Education Committee meeting on the 8th of November. School staff views were split over the plans, with more in favour than against, but more than a quarter remained unsure. Pupils backed the plans, although a significant number were undecided. Finally, the Department for Education has said it will end its grant scheme for schools choosing to be an academy at the end of this year, and has no plans to continue to run its trust capacity and trust establishment and growth funds. According to the report in Schools Week, trusts waiting to hear about capacity and growth funding bids for this summer's funding round have also been told no cash will be handed out. The government's upcoming Children's Wellbeing Bill will seek to bring the two parts of the sector closer together, requiring academies to follow the national curriculum and cooperate with councils on admissions and pupil place planning. The Confederation of School Trusts said the decisions would make it much more difficult for trusts to support maintained schools that need help. Further details of the story can be found on the Schools Week website. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Okay, thank you to Jo there for the news, and welcome back to our show. This evening, if you're listening live, it is Friday, 6 o'clock here in the UK, nearly 7, which means Martin and Kiki, it's nearly 8 o'clock for you. If you're listening on the podcast, thank you very much for downloading us. We are talking today about what we can learn from the Swedish education system, what we can share as sort of best practice from UK to Sweden, Sweden back to here, and particularly picking up on relational approaches as something that, you know, from the discussion, and Martin and Kiki, thank you for the points that you shared before we had the news break, but it does seem that that kind of power of relationships, that connection, is something that's really embedded in the Swedish system. And interestingly here, it's quite a divisive topic where people will say, I'm all for it, whereas other people will say, no, we need a kind of command and conquer approach. We've got to be rigid, we've got to be strict, we've got to have crystal clear black and white, binary boundaries, and there really isn't any room in those systems for flexibility. So Kiki, if you want to comment, please do. I'm sorry you haven't been able to join us live, but obviously to speak, but you're more than welcome to text in. And Martin, I wonder what your thoughts are. What would you say to the people who perhaps are unsure or are doubting what kind of impact a relational approach can have in their school?
So I'd like to begin with, I had a chance to think about this. When I was about 14, somebody came up to me, I guess it was an auntie or something, and they said, would you like some cheesecake? And in my mind, I had a slice of cheddar and a piece of cake. And I thought, what?
Okay.
No. And they said, oh, go on, it's nice. And I said, no, thank you, politely. And they said, no, you'll love it. You'll really enjoy it. And I went, no. And I kind of, now the wall went up. Mm. The more I, now as an adult, talk about the importance of having a relation with your students, the louder I preach about it, the bigger the wall goes up. So I don't. What I can say is I completely understand that you will never like cheesecake until you've had some. It took somebody else to come along and say, Martin, do you want ice cream cake? And I thought, oh, yeah, I'll have some of that. Turns out it's the same thing. I swallowed the ice cream cake, and then I realized that it was the same stuff. If they'd only told me this in the first place, I would have loved it. I haven't found the magic words for relational teaching or whatever you want to call it. I haven't found the words for it. But what I do know is once you have experienced it, either as a student or as a teacher, you'll never go anywhere near command and conquer. You will see it as a fear-based response. Mm. And that level of fear shuts down the students and the adults, come to think, shuts down people's minds, and you're then trying to push information into a closed mind. However, you need a relation that opens up a mind, opens up a heart, and the learning is easy. It's like butter, as Martin said. It's like, why didn't I know this the first time round? Now, he was brave enough to say, all right, I'll have a go. Teach me how to do this. Mm-hmm. Now, I can understand why somebody might think, and I'm going to pick up your words, what if it all goes wrong?
Yeah.
If you have been trained, you don't mind if it all goes wrong, because there is no wrong. There is only what is. You don't judge it. So you ask your question, or you make your approach, or whatever it is, and then whatever comes out, comes out. Whatever is said, and you are not judging it, controlling it, directing it, limiting. No, you're just there with it.
As you saying that about it's a fear-based system, there's just been a light bulb that's just gone on in my head, and it's almost that the adults, that the leaders, that the teachers are in the UK have so much accountability, they are scared of that. Therefore, not willing to take the risk because they have this, I know I've used the phrase, it all goes wrong. Whereas actually, as you say, if you take away that layer of judgment, if you take away, people interpreting it in a certain way, actually, you've just got, it is what it is.
And you might think, oh, it's easier in a Swedish school because they've got relationships, etc. Let me give you a counter example. On my travels as a teacher / coach, I get invited to go to schools where classes have collapsed, come into conflict, or whatever. And I was invited to a particular class, 2 classes, in fact, with 5 teachers in all, and they were trying to teach these students Swedish because they were all immigrants.
Yep.
This was their last year at school of compulsory education, but they'd only been in the country for a couple of years. Let's take a pause for a minute. They came from another country where they do not speak Swedish. They've never heard the language before.
Yeah.
They are teleported rudely or transported, should I say, to another country because of the war.
Mm-hmm.
Without parents, they're refugees. They're put into accommodation and they are sent to a Swedish school because they're entitled to education.
Yeah.
And they are taught maths, English, and all the basics, all the other subjects in Swedish, not in their native language or languages, because most of them speak 3 or 4. They are taught everything through a foreign language at the same pace as their peers who've been working together in another class for years and years and years, and they are compared with them, and they're going to have an exam in a month or so time. The students are in panic mode because they can see their future is about to go from refugee to unemployed.
Right.
So in the middle of all of that, I was brought in to do my magic.
Yeah.
And it really does look like magic. Now, I've been trained. I have some really good training, which I recommend all teachers should have, but that would be advertising, so I'm not doing that. I didn't say that. What I'm saying is teachers should be trained to how to build relationships. So my first move to build the relationship was to greet the students in the doorway. I blocked the door with my foot and I greeted every single one. Eye contact, handshake if they wish. My name's Martin. What's yours? Pleased to meet you. Do come in. Have a seat. Now we put all the chairs in a circle. So the first thing they thought, whoa, something's happening here. Something different. Who's this guy? And I made it feel like church because I knew they all had religion in their blood.
Okay. Yeah.
They all came in one by one. The teachers were there. And I told the teachers, watch me gain control of the class. It will take 7 minutes. So they were gobsmacked from minute number 1. That's my way of, getting their expectations high. I walked round to the front of the room and everyone's sitting there looking up at me with huge expectation. That's how you start a lesson. So I knew I had to have some topic, but I knew whatever topic I was taking up was only to fill the space until something happened, because I wanted to get to the point where something would go wrong, because the go wrong was why I was there. If we then had a quiet lesson with nothing went wrong, what's the point of me being there? Something had to go wrong, right? Otherwise, there's no point me being there. So I started talking. And I noticed that one of the young men was, they were all sitting down, but he had his head facing the floor and he was looking for all the world like he was going to cry.
Oh.
I mean, I don't blame him, poor sod. He's a refugee. He's about to become unemployed. And a lot of them have in their hearts and minds that they need to bring their family home to Sweden to safety. It's their job as it's their job to get a job. So I went over to him and I knelt beside him, breaking the bubble that I'd created. And I asked him how he was in a loud enough voice that everyone could hear. We're having a private conversation here, but you can listen if you want to, but don't interrupt. And I took him through a coaching session in front of his peers. Now I can do that because I've been trained.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid. It goes wherever it goes. And I'm with whatever happens. I can't reveal what happened. We get through this and he is then literally lit up. His head comes up, his face lights up, and he lights up the whole room. And I back away slowly because he now owns the room. He is in control of the room in terms of he is the soul, the rekindling of hope in that room. Now, if teachers could do that, we wouldn't have to have command and control.
And I love that you just hear you talking there about, obviously the impact that had on the young man that you were working with, but for you as well, obviously seeing that change in a short period of time. And it's interesting you touched on using that coaching methodology, because it is something that is coming in, particularly for leaders. The current NPQs, National Professional Qualifications, that heads can do, that Senkos can do, they all now are building in coaching into the package, the qualification, the year or the 18 months, however long it lasts for. And I think for me, that can only be a good thing. And you've just demonstrated exactly there how you can take it further than just the leaders having that as something for themselves, but actually how you can then use it in the classroom with the students and get some really powerful results.
Very powerful results. And I would say that is available to any teacher anywhere once they've had the training. And the training gives you the confidence that there is no such thing as it all goes wrong. It is what it is. And you learn. It's this sort of comfort zone. In the middle of this comfort zone, nothing can go wrong. Nothing goes right either.
Yeah.
And outside of that is this stretch zone of, it's uncomfortable. I don't know what's going to, I need the rules. No, that's back in the middle again. You have to transcend the rules. And coaching has, guidelines, I suppose, is the best you could call them. And you hold the belief that there is no right or wrong. You hold the belief that these people are creative, that they are whole, that they are curious about the world. And you are too. And with that approach, there is no I'm right, you're wrong. And the command structure disappears. It does not mean you lose authority. Not at all. I had massive authority in that room because as I stepped away, they looked at the transformation in him and they looked to me, and guess what they wanted? They wanted the same for themselves.
Yeah.
Please do me next. So when I said, who'd like to come up here and talk about their future, I got the biggest, the troublemaker, the loudest one walked straight out. And the teachers went, you could see them, oh no. And I just thought, oh good. I want the big one. I want the big guy. I want the big troublemaker. Because with that one, everything's easy.
Yeah.
And I'll save you the story. But it was miraculous. In the end, the young man walks up to his teacher and says, will you please teach me Swedish? This has gone from, we refuse, we're not doing this, we're out of here.
Yeah.
And then there are tears on all shoulders, and including mine come to that. And they just said, how did you do it? And I said, you saw me do it. It's as easy as that.
Yeah.
But it's more, it's like the swan, I'm elegant on the surface, but am I paddling below the water? And what I'm paddling is fear. I'm just pushing it aside, because I do feel fear. But I don't let it take over. I don't let it get above my knees.
I think, what you said there about, authority and command, they're not the same thing.
No.
And I think that is a trap that a lot of people fall into, is that assuming that if they are not in command of a situation, they have therefore lost their authority. And actually, if you think about people who, not just in the world of education, but global figures who are held up as being brilliant leaders, they are not always the ones that are in charge. They are not always the ones that are controlling a situation, but it's their influence and their authority that actually makes the difference. And hearing you talk about those young men, that for them, seeing that change, and for their teachers seeing that change, that shift between who's got authority, who's actually taking ownership. That's huge. We could probably talk about this, Martin, all day, and I'm mindful A, of your evening, and B, of my scheduling time. So I think what we will do, we will hear from our sponsors one more time, and then if I could come back to you just for 5 minutes or so for a little bit of a sort of conclusion, any final remarks, and Kiki as well, as I know you're still with us on the text in service. So if you have anything, Kiki, that you would like to add as a sort of summary, please do pop that in over the next couple of minutes. And anyone else listening as well, if you've got any closing remarks, I will come to those after we've heard from our sponsors.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Do you ever wish you could sit down with other teachers and delve into the challenges and opportunities we face? Well, that's exactly what Table Talks at BetUK is all about. Join small roundtable discussions based on your selected topics to share insights, learn from peers, and tackle the big issues in education, all in a sponsor-free environment. This is your chance to connect and collaborate like never before. Be part of the conversation at BetUK in January 2025. Visit uk.betshow.com to learn more.
Thank you again to our sponsors for supporting us at Teachers Talk Radio, and a huge thank you as well to Martin and Kiki for joining me this evening to share all sorts of wonderful, I would say snippets, but it's so much more than that, wonderful thoughts, insights, experiences from their time in the Swedish education system. And Martin, you did say sort of working around the edges, but I think what you've shared and the knowledge that people will have gained, and the whole point of this show was, what can we share, what can we learn from one another as teachers? Because we spend so much time teaching the students, and actually, perhaps we should spend more time on ourselves. And you've brought up some really key points to me. Things like, what I see and what I hear are the things that are important. You talked about students, if they arrive, they're here. It's not about being late, it's about the fact they're here and they've showed up. And just recently, the power of relationships as well. Now, as I said earlier on, we could talk about this till the cows come home, I'm sure. I think you said 2 to 3 weeks if I gave you a sandwich.
Maybe more than one sandwich. If you're going to 2 or 3 weeks.
All right then, a sandwich a day. But I just wondered what your sort of final thoughts are and reflections really on our conversation this evening.
Yeah, now I don't know where I've heard this phrase, but someone said, or I've seen it written, if you get tired, don't quit, learn to rest. Ooh. And I'm thinking of how that applies to teachers. It's like, if you don't get to do what you want to do in schools, if you feel that, for example, that relationships are important, don't quit, because that doesn't help anybody. Oh, having said that, I did. I did quit. But my advice to myself is, I go back in my time machine and say, look, Martin, you don't have to quit. Just hang in there. It's going to take 20 or 30 years. I wish I knew then how powerful coaching is, and I wish I knew then how to do it. And how long would it take? I don't think it's necessarily the skills. It's more the mindset behind them. And I think I had that at an early stage. I wish I'd hung in a little bit longer. I was definitely maneuvered out, but I wish I'd hung in a little bit longer.
And
9 out of 10, Martin.
I think that, that kind of loops back nicely to some of the things you said at the beginning, actually, about sometimes people feel like they don't fit in. Teachers are quite often the creative ones. They challenge the norm. They think about things and they want to try something new. And actually, to be able to do those things, as you say, if you quit, if you leave, you don't have that opportunity anymore. Obviously, I would always say if people are really struggling to the point that it's affecting things like their health, their mental well-being, you've got to make sometimes some pretty big decisions, haven't you, about your career at that point. But there are plenty of things that perhaps we can do or do more of. And Kiki, thank you, because you've shared that as educators we don't give up. We're there for the long run. These aren't things that can be fixed overnight. By showing them that showing the students that we are there, you can build that trust and understanding that when they are challenging us, there is a reason. And Kiki, thank you, because you've gone on to say we need to ask the question why, so we can create a solution together. And when we think about coaching, it's not just about the leaders, as in the deputy heads, the head teachers, but actually the classroom teachers. They are leaders as well. They're leaders of people in the room. And absolutely, I love that. We start with humour, fun, and play.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
that's the oil in the engine.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's no humour, fun, and play. The gears go round and round, but they make a horrible noise.
Crunch together. Yeah.
We've been training students to coach. The instructions that we give students for group work, for example, include coaching instructions around how to get past conflicts, how to structure the work. Instead of telling them what to do, we ask, instead of saying, have you finished the work? Yes or no. How far have you come? Because it then puts the work, puts the thinking back on them. And what are the options moving forward? And which of those options do you feel is most appropriate? And why do you think it's most appropriate? Which one are you choosing now? How many of you are behind this choice? You seem to have a split. How are you going to divide that? Brilliant questions. And then suddenly go, can we have the older one students? They want to have those questions.
Yeah. And that, giving the students that skill set, I think that's perhaps something, definitely here in the UK we can learn from, because, low arousal approaches are definitely a thing, definitely something that lots of schools are adopting, which is great. But combining that with the coaching, not just at leadership level, but actually everybody in the school community, whether they're student, whether they're staff, that's transformational. That really does feel like it could just kind of almost flip things completely around. We touched on earlier on students that are anxious, students that they're not attending lessons, they're being excluded, and this could really change that.
I certainly use the coach type questions with my excluded students, because I knew that any kind of confrontational question, a yes/no question, is too confrontational for them. I had to find a softer approach, and asking them a question where there's a scale of answers and I don't know the right answer, but they can give me an opinion all the time. That really helped. Rather than saying, do this, do that, I asked them, which ones do you feel like having a go at? And exploring the rationale and the feelings behind why not this one, what's putting you off. Oh, I see, right. And then, you're not getting a little bit curious? I am. That kind of playfulness. That really helped get them past the I can't, and I don't want to, and I'm no good at this, and because they've been told that so many times. Anyway,
I think in terms of, there's so much we've covered, and thank you so much for spending your Friday evening with me and with our listeners. I think a couple of takeaways from me. As we mentioned about, it's not about being late, it's about being here, it's about recognising the fact that those students have made the effort to join. Kiki, I love what you said about being authentic as well. You'd popped that comment in a few minutes ago. We are people, we are human beings, and the power of that connection is the thing that makes the big difference. And just to finish off, it's not about losing control. It's not about losing some kind of, that command and conquer and it's all going to suddenly disintegrate into chaos. Actually, it's about leading authentically and leading with humanity. So I think everything you've said this evening, both of you, it is the power of human connection, but it's also the power of valuing one another as individuals and seeing that actually we can all bring something. It doesn't matter what our role is, and we can do that in a way that means we still have, the role of teacher that's, assigned to us. That's our job title, but we can work with one another instead of working one against the other. So that's my huge takeaway. And, that's me got an answer to my question at the beginning of the show, which was what can we share and learn from one another. So thank you to both of you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both. Kiki has finished with "We are a team." I think I'm going to leave it there because I can't say it any better than that. So have a lovely weekend, Martin and Kiki in particular, and all of the listeners. If you're listening on a different day of the week, enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you very much for being here.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.